What if the epicness that we sometimes spend our entire lifetime searching for exists not in spite of the boulders, but thanks to the boulder version of you, that these boulders inspire you to become? Often, when we least expect it, life thrusts us into the role of the reluctant hero or hero in our own story. How we respond in those moments can be the difference between thriving or just surviving. We believe that our story will be determined by how we dare to answer one burning question: how to choose to live. Join us as we explore the mindset shifts, innovative strategies, and captivating stories from my own life experience and those of my truly epic guests. So let's get this started. So, welcome to another one of our bonus sort of coaching sessions that we offer as How to Choose to Live podcast, so that you can be a little fly on the wall with my amazing, epic, super side chick, Sandy, the amazing Queen Sandy, who is always rocking the world here in Grit. Um, Today's a little bit different, interestingly enough. So, Sandy and I were having a conversation that I think is so relevant to probably some of you who are listening, that we're going to run this just a little bit differently. We want you to be a little fly on the wall. And of course, we want you to feel free to share this if you knew someone else who would benefit from being a fly on the wall with this. But rather than having Sandy bring the question like she normally does, today I thought I would share with you the topic that she brought up off camera before we actually had hit the record. And this is my example of like Sandy and her brilliance. And, she said, well, I think maybe we're going to talk about limiting beliefs, but there's also this that I've been hearing, right? And so oh, by the way, this I've been hearing is phenomenal. And so you're probably curious what this is. So specifically, our conversation is around those times when the boulders in your life are so freaking big and they come out of nowhere, and you have done everything in your power to keep them out of your life, to combat them, and it's almost as if they have gained a life of their own, and then boom, there they are. And let's face it, in those moments, the overwhelming evidence, and we were talking about this in my own experience with Skylar's scenario when she was literally crushed by a boulder. There was 2,000 years worth of evidence saying that what I wish could happen is impossible. There's just nothing to support that this can be the outcome, right? That Skylar would survive. At that point, the boulder had cracked open her skull as one of the many injuries, and you could see the brain. And going all the way back to Hippocrates, if you can see someone's brain, they don't survive. It's pretty cut and dry, and they really haven't figured out how to circumvent that yet. And yet, as you know, not only did Skylar survive, but she is breaking through boundaries. So what does that have to do really with the conversation and what we were talking about? And where, for me, where it rolls back to is the concept of when we have overwhelming evidence that says that something is impossible, that something is inevitable. This is what, we are barreling down the hill as part of this avalanche, and there's no emergency brake here. What kind of action can we take? What kind of action can be effective? And how do we avoid not getting desensitized to the horror that's going on around us? How do we avoid not giving up hope? How do we avoid getting beaten down and just retreating into
Mhm.
ourselves and
And
believing that,
then, and if
yeah,
we have retreated, then how do we work to come back out again? How do, because I think
yeah.
it's and at least for me, it's inevitable that if something comes and knocks me, my immediate reaction is to kind of protect myself and pull inside. But then pulling back out again to then do something so that I know I'm doing whatever I can accomplish.
So that, that's a fabulous point and kind of a fabulous question. And I think that that is the natural response for most of us. I mean, absolutely. For me, initially, when I got the call, uh, right after I informed my mom and my other daughter, I couldn't get a hold of my son. I literally collapsed on the floor. And my first thoughts were, oh my gosh, why me? Why did Skylar end up with me as her mom? I'm not up to the task here. I don't have enough money. I don't have enough experience with all this. It was all of the not enoughness, and this problem is infinitely bigger than me, right? There are too many other wheels out there. And so I think the first step is not to beat yourself up when that is the initial, flight response, right? There's
Mhm.
fight, but there's also that flight, and sometimes flight is hiding and retreat, and let's wait until the storm passes,
Mhm.
right? And so I think this is where it can be really helpful if you have already been doing some of the inner game work. This is one of the reasons why this kind of goes back to the little um Aesop's fable of, the ants that were working and preparing and preparing for winter time so that they had all their little food. And there were the two colonies, and one went out and played and had a good old time, and the others just worked and prepared. And then when lo and behold the snow came, the ones that had been playing around were like, oh my god, what do we do? And the ones that had prepared, you know they were a little more taken care of, a little more prepared, a little more ready to face what the hardship that still they were going to be facing. Um, and they had stacked the odds in their favor. And so, clearly, when is the best time to plant a tree? 20 years ago. When's the
Right.
second best time? Today, right? That's an old Chinese proverb. And so all hope is not lost if you don't feel like you are like an inner game guru at this point when you're facing it. I certainly didn't feel like a guru when the boulder fell. And yet, what the best place to go, in my humble experience, is that inner game, whatever you have, and to realize, I mean, as you and I were talking about, Sandy, that entire book, 100 Days of Epic, is
Mhm.
about the difference that 100 days, 3 months of inner game action, how that one little focus every single day, one little inner game action every single day can give you a completely new instrument to work with. And so I think the fallacy is that we have, in order to be effective in order to change the world or do whatever we want to do, overcome this formidable obstacle, we have to be aligned. We have to be thinking positive 100% of the time, or certainly 55% of the time. Well, honestly, the inner game, the focus, those three things, putting the elf in the room instead of the elephant, the envision, the language, the focus, simply learning how to master those three aspects or working toward improving those three aspects of your inner game gives you a leg up, gives you it creates a trajectory that is so much stronger than just the chaos of kind of angry, frustrated, those what are those quote unquote vibrations, those energetic vibrations. And do not forget that we are energy beings. So those energetic vibrations that are on that lower spectrum are not as organized as the ones that are in alignment. So when you can focus on getting better and better and more aligned to the feeling, and this is where it can feel so frustrating to us because we've got all this stuff
Mm-hmm.
manifested around us, visible, that we're like, this is real. How do I invest? How do I trust that by training my mind to spend even 5 minutes a day beyond that, and with that envisioning, really honing that envisioning muscle and getting in tune with the feeling, that it will actually be able to make an impact, that it will be able to tip the scale. Well, it's hard for our logical mind to wrap around that and
Well,
say
that's what
that,
I was just gonna, if I can ask you a
yeah,
question
go for it.
with the envisioning. So one of the things that happens to me is the self-talk will especially because I feel like with if things are going on outside of myself that I have no control over and it feels very negative, the self-talk will be, well, you need to do something. You need to do something. And if you're focusing on your thought, but that's not doing something. So what would you recommend would be that first step to kind of touch that? And then when you're talking about envisioning, what do you mean by that?
Sure. Those are great questions, of course, Sandy. And so the first thing is, I mean, and this is going to sound trivial, but the first thing is to remember to keep breathing and to breathe as deeply as you can. And to remember that just because you are thinking something does not make it real. Because again, just to add a little bit of contrast here, I could not do anything for Skylar. Nothing.
Mhm.
I could not do anything. I was not a neurosurgeon. There was nothing I could do. And so logically, if I had gotten into the space of you got to do something, you got to take action, I, ironically enough, could very easily have complicated everything. Imagine if every time the doctors walked into the little ICU, and I'm standing there, and I said, "What are you gonna do? How are you gonna help my daughter? Are you giving her the right medication? Is that the right procedure?" So instead of them focusing on their greatness and their capability and their brilliance and remembering themselves at their best, now I'm creating an energy of failure around them,
Mm-hmm.
of chaos, of turmoil. And that energy of chaos and turmoil is is very frenetic, and the potential for that was there. And yet, by simply having the mental discipline, and in these moments, it's not a great thing to hear, but you have to exert discipline over your mind and say, "Thank you, but this thought is their thought." Those people that are causing you concern, the situation that is causing you concern, if that thought does not empower you, then virus protect it and throw it in quarantine. And you are the only one who can do that. Because again, the inner game, this, when we are facing things that upset us traumatically, that is our opportunity to realize, like no other time, that it is precisely in these moments when we must invest in the inner game. Think of the prisoners of war who were in incredible conditions for years on end. Their story, the survivors, their story is the same. They always come out saying they did horrible things to my body. They tried to break me. But when I took control and I envisioned a world where, and it's not the same as being optimistic, it's because optimism is still contingent on the circumstances around you changing. Envisioning is you taking control and you saying, "This is my story." And it's going very general. Envisioning, that envisioning muscle is something you can control. No one else can get in there and force you to think things. At times, you must buy into it.
Mm-hmm.
And there are tactics to get you to buy into it, which can be very compelling. But ultimately, at the end of the day, it is you and your mental toughness and your mental discipline. And there may be times where you feel like circumstances or these anti-mentors in your lives have you in a scenario where you feel like a prisoner of war, and you need to have the tenacity and the courage to not only believe in the impact that your inner game can have, but to have the boldness to keep working on it, even if at the beginning, maybe you only have energy for 5 minutes a day to successfully execute that. Those 5 minutes of alignment are infinitely more impactful and powerful by nature than many, many more chaotic moments, because the opening with chaos is for more chaos.
Mm-hmm.
Chaos has trouble holding form, and it breeds infighting, it breeds viruses, infestation, all kinds of weaknesses, because it's meant to disrupt, but it leaves a vacuum.
Mm-hmm.
And so what fills that vacuum is often influenced by what is the energy that is being focused on it. That's what quantum physics is all about. energy at its most kind of organic level. And again, we are energy.
And one of the things that you made me think of too is because I was just thinking, oh, 5 minutes, it doesn't feel like it's a heck of a lot, when you have feel like there's a lot coming at you. But I remember you talking about the
Yes.
1% movement, and that you can probably explain it better, but just that if you're changing, just moving that 1% ticker, it ends up becoming so much bigger as it adds up together.
Yes. I mean, and the thing is that it increases exponentially, right? I mean, it's like compounding interest. And
Hmm.
so it is definitely effective. And this is another example when you or we, human beings, sometimes you have to just keep going more and more general. Sometimes when your lens is so close and you're saying, I need to do something, I need to figure something out, it feels like you're being suffocated. And so this is where the more that you have worked with your inner game, meaning your thoughts, your language, the more that you have worked with yourself. And at first, there's going to be a lot of skepticism because it's unfamiliar for you, right? It's unfamiliar for all of us because we are not trained in this, we are not taught this. And yet, just because it's unfamiliar doesn't mean it's not powerful. Again, as you and I were mentioning off camera, I realized very quickly there was no action that I could take with Skylar. And so, therefore, I invested in a lot. And when I say invested, I invested my faith, my trust, my 1,000%. And people, and I literally thought some people are going to think I am insane. Like woo woo and oh my gosh, this poor child, how did she end up with this delusional mother? She needs to go out and do something. Take
Hmm.
action like most of us would, right? Not all this like airy fairy crap, right? In the Sky's the Limit book, you can see, I mean, the dialogue was not let's go out and do something, save my daughter,
Right.
these doctors or this and that. It was very inner game sort of stuff. It was very, again, envision heavy, language heavy, meaning deliberately choosing which words to use, and definitely focusing
Mhm.
on the presence of what it is. Because, and this is what we don't, we it by nature, it's almost impossible for us to fully grasp. It's that other dimension of, the presence of what we want. It's coming together. It's the old believing is seeing. It's why some people can create cell phones when everybody else says it's impossible.
Hmm.
So it's someone someone's in ability to envision, to corral their thoughts every time they are defeated or feel a failure. They don't say, oh, they're right, it doesn't work. They're like, okay, all right, what didn't work? What do I need to do differently? And so with the inner game, we have that same opportunity. And so we can look at something like where that's all I felt I had.
Hmm.
That's all I felt I had. And it was those 3 questions. It was what can I control? What can my mind believe? And therefore, how can I help my mind believe thoughts that empower me? And that speaks to the limiting beliefs and the, oh my gosh, I need to take action, doesn't
Hmm.
empower you. And then the third, what might I be assuming that is not necessarily true? And that is that the most powerful action is to get out there and,
Hmm.
you know, fight whatever it is, even if there
Right.
isn't. I mean, how many people refer to cancer as like the sea monster, and
Hmm.
fight, fight, fight. And so it creates a huge adversary, so I think that this is really high level inner game when there's not a lot of encouragement out there. There's not a lot of things that would speak to um the inner game being anything other than a frivolity. Like, in fact, it's almost, there's a part of our minds that when we're in the middle of a crisis makes us feel either like an idiot, if we can be, or like a betrayer. I mean, there were thoughts that I had to push down, like when I was in Colombia, and now I had decided this is the only thing I can control. This is the only thing. I mean, this whole like law of attracting the right action, energy thing, neuroscience, it's either real or it's not real. And dang it, it's the only thing the only action that really I can do
Hmm.
that would has a prayer of helping. It's either real or it's not, right? And so therefore, as I invested in that, the morning after I got there, when we woke up and this amazing, kind couple had taken my daughter and I and Skylar's friend Dana into their home. And we were walking the couple blocks to the little hospital. Um, there was an avocado stand and a mango stand. And I stopped and took pictures on my phone so that I could show them to Skylar, and got myself in a place that I can honestly call a happy place. And most people would rationally say, this mother is in shock. She's delusional. How can you, I mean, how can you, uh, how are you not betraying your daughter to laugh and smile and be happy when she's been freaking crushed by a boulder and probably will not survive? What's wrong with you? And yet, we don't know. I mean, those who know and believe and invest in the power of the inner game would say, of course. Of course
Hmm.
it flowed. Of course you saw impossibilities right and left. Of course you saw miracle after miracle after miracle. Now, as I made clear, I absolutely do not claim that my inner game was what saved Skylar, because I know for a fact that those doctors, the whole medical team worked magical things. But what I do know is that human history is filled with miracles, things that should not be possible. And there is typically a common thread in those. So the tipping point, it seems, is triggered more often than not with the power of that inner game, the commitment to play the inner game to win. And when there's a collective desire or commitment to play that inner game, all focused, and that's one of the things I believe was magical with Skylar's scenario, is that thanks to social media in this case, now thousands of people started buying into these very inner game, positively focused, empowering words, and their expectation of the scenario shifted. And to me, that's an additional kind of, what if that really did have an
Mm-hmm.
impact. And so therefore, let's think on a global sense now with some of the great global challenges that humanity encounters time after time after time. And sometimes we wring our hands and just say, oh my God, are we, as a species, are we ever going to get to the point where we can just live
Mm-hmm.
in peace and be happy? And to me, this keeps going back. It's an amplified version of what we often experience individually. And it's that we repeat the same things over and over again until we feel the pain to such an extent that we're willing to say, okay, maybe I'll risk believing in something that I haven't believed in so far.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, that the big what if is on a global scale, what if the positive dance partner in a scenario where many people feel like I can't go out and take action. That will have serious repercussions because in a way I am kind of feeling like I'm in this prisoner of war
Mm-hmm.
camp. Everything is pointing to, guess what? Now's the time to imagine if more people could get really good at getting in alignment, blowing past the elephant in the room, the elf in the room, being able to envision, s- specifically, intentionally choose the language, and not just the language they're sharing with each other, but the language that they tolerate within their own mind and give credence and say, you are part of who I am.
Mm-hmm.
The language that disempowers us should not be welcomed any more than we would welcome external elements into our home that we do not feel are beneficial for us. Right? So imagine, and then the focus now, I mean, one of the, I'm going to use this word intentionally, the challenge is, are we willing to dare to risk that the outcome that we desire is only achievable by getting to the point, like the inventors, where we train ourselves, because we have very few other options, we train ourselves to focus on the feeling of the presence of what it is that we want. What does it feel like?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the world I want to live in, it feels like joy. It feels like alignment. It feels like calm. It feels like kindness. It feels like brotherly love. It feels like uplifting. It feels like empowerment. It feels like collaboration. It feels like unexpected and remarkable things that make me laugh. It
Mm-hmm.
feels like acceptance. It feels like thriving. It feels like abundance. It feels like momentum. It feels like energy. It
You hit
feels
the
like
you hit the nail
peace.
on the head. I was actually going to just state that that's one of the things I so appreciate. And you've touched on the energy a couple of times because I've found that when I do get bogged down, my energy, I just have none, or I feel like I have none. And what a difference just even talking about it tonight has shifted my energy because it's just I feel a lot lighter when I'm thinking about those things that are getting to me. And it's there's the mental work, but there's also that energy shift as well. I
Yes, that's such a great point, and that's so important. And I would encourage you to take it even one step further, and that is in this state that now you feel, do you feel a little bit more like the best of you, the brilliance of you could have a little bit of hope, could almost see, okay, I can see how I might be able to be a Shiro in this story. I can,
hmm
my ability to envision is clear. When we started the conversation, it felt like, well, all I can envision is not anything I want to see right now, you know?
Yeah, and it's also being okay with I might not know what
Yeah.
that action is or what that next step is, but just to have faith and trust that I'll get there.
Yes, and here's a part that you may want to think about a little bit. But what you're feeling right now is this bizarre sort of opening of a door of, at the end of the day, sometimes it isn't the what we consider action that moves the needle. And it's like looking for love in all the wrong places. You're not trying to find the zen so that you can go out there and take action.
Right.
You are trying to find the alignment and the state and the inner game so that the magic can happen. And throughout centuries, magic has happened, whether you consider it by the grace of God or just, inspiration, whatever. But at the end of the day, define action. And it may not be the type of action that feels hard right now.
hmm
In fact, there may come a time where you may look back and go, oh my gosh, I am so glad I felt like I had no options of real physical action because it forced me to believe that the only thing that I could do was this wimpy little thing called the inner game. And wow, look at collectively when enough people say, well, maybe, I guess it's all I can do right now. Yes,
It's a
great.
heck
That
of a
could be
lot.
the best thing. And I'm
hmm
going back to a global sense, that might be the best thing in the long game for humanity to realize that if we focus strictly on the outer game, and which we've done for thousands of years, we screw it up sometimes royally. And so now it's kind of like, have we played that same version of the game long enough so that maybe some of you might be open to the possibility that, again, there's no place like home. I went to Oz hoping to find the answer, and it was in my backyard all along.
hmm
So there's so much reason for excitement and focus and focusing. I mean, we can control this. That's exciting, right? There's no Vulcan mind meld, right? We
hmm
have sovereignty over that. And so therefore, even if we got locked in our homes again, we have the capacity and now maybe even the desire to put the emphasis, to focus, to learn how to play the inner game to win. And 100 freaking days can transform your life. So, oh my gosh, Sandy, you always come up with the most intriguing, best topics. I hope that this has helped you as
Oh,
you've
yeah.
brought to the table some things that you've been hearing, maybe some of the things you've been feeling.
Mm-hmm.
And those of you in our tramily who are listening to this, I know as we every now and then go a little deep, you know. I know we little a little bit deep here, but thank you so much for sticking with us through this. And I hope that we gave you something, whether you agree with it or not, but a little something to ponder and think about. And some of you maybe we even energized, but I hope um, that we have uplifted you in some way, left you with a little bit more radiance in your energy. And I hope that um, if you know of someone who maybe you think Sandy and my conversations might benefit, point them toward the How to Choose to Live podcast, because Sandy and I are going to be doing more and more of these. So as you can see, this one was a little bit more like a fireside chat. Sometimes they'll be more like formal questions, but they're always intended to help you be that little fly on the wall and ask some questions that maybe you don't even know you have, but to help you figure out how to go out there and become the most epic version of yourself, empowered, purpose-driven, innovative, collaborative, and live a life where you're taking your last breath going, oh my God, that was freaking epic. I hope I have the chance to do it again sometime. So um, thank you so much for tuning in to the How to Choose to Live podcast, and we will see you next time. And be sure to subscribe and like and comment. All right. Talk to you soon. Bye.